This video is not intended to encourage or glorify any kind of drug use. The sole purpose of these videos is to educate you on the dangers of what these substances can do to you. Please do not do any of the acts mentioned in this video. I repeat, do not do any of the acts mentioned in this video. It took me very long to edit and submit this experience, because while it is one of many insane trials, this was by far the most profound. To this day, I still do not see the world the same. As of today, I have been sober for 14.5 months from all drugs and alcohol. I live a spiritual life. I have a true purpose now. I believe that because of this experience, my ideas of what is possible is infinite. I also believe that this and the other experiences were spiritual experiences with deeper meanings that I currently cannot fully comprehend. I may never be able to. I have accepted that now. Myself interacting with higher orders of being, as well as lower orders, through the duration, 5 years, of my active intense alpha PvP research addiction gave me plenty of evidence that something is going on outside of normal human perception. The drug gave me reliable, consistent contact with spirits through paranoia, sleep deprivation, and extreme prolonged isolation in the countryside of Kentucky. Anyways, I hope the following report will show the dangers and potential of alpha PvP. It is an incredible chemical that I use in an inappropriate and abusive way. Joyfully and sadly, I cannot use the substance, or any other, ever again if I want to live. My own experience and a helping hand from the universe has led me to that conclusion. On March 16, 2016, I got it in my head that all my neighbors were DARPA operatives filming me and beaming voices into my head with advanced technology. DARPA stands for Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. It is the research and development arm of the Pentagon. I had been up for 6 days constantly vaping large amounts of alpha PvP off of foil in my mother's windowless bathroom, overdosing over and over again, putting myself in conscious frozen catatonic psychosis over and over again, sometimes for hours. They began stealing my cats and cloning them, telling me I'll never love them the same again. That morning, I thought I was stuck in a time loop where I either had to kill myself or go to the ER, where I would be arrested on federal charges for importing large amounts of alpha PvP for years. I was hearing a team of guys that were able to manipulate reality, them being DARPA agents, of course. I saw things disappear out of my hands, cars repeating as they drove by, motorcycles too. There was a death line on my property that if I walked past, they would stop my heart with a satellite. They projected images onto doors and walls inside my mother's house. The team had scanned and installed electronics all over the home. They knew everything there was to know about me, my mind, and my mother's home. The voices kept saying I was under attack by a remote weapon program designed to drive the target insane. They, Team DARPA management, were controlling my inner voice and thoughts. When I thought for a mere second that I had control, I would instantly hear "Codebreaker." They kept insulting me and telling me I was doomed. I kept hearing "Team DARPA management, bitch," screamed into my head by a female. Eventually, I had a lengthy conversation with her as she projected CGI into my reality from their facility in San Francisco and onto the window of my neighbor's outside garage. Then I was told I could be a DARPA agent if I renounced all alpha PvP use forever, so I ran across the acre backyard to my family hysterical, excited, finally, to be free of alpha PvP and have a purpose. I had to sit with my back against the wall with my knees bent and my arms around my legs to get the best reception of the transmissions. My father, who was on the phone with my mother, called the ER and firefighters. Ambulances and cops came. While trying to calm me down in the garage, I started to receive specific instructions from Sarah, my DARPA handler. I shoved a picture of my cat up my ass, only after writing down the secret code given to me by Gwyneth Paltrow. Yes, she was a DARPA agent too. Then I ran from the officers through the basement and dove headfirst out the laundry room window and jumped into my pool. I had to release the picture from my ass with the picture side up so my cat could see the sunshine. I was told, and I did. Then the voices told me if I followed every instruction from there on, I would qualify. So I had to say what now seems like gibberish, and I had to repeat. I renounce Alpha PvP. This is a performance by Homegrown Grass-Grown Productions to show the danger of Alpha PvP. Eventually, I went to the hospital and was told by Sarah to make a giant scene, that DARPA had remotely filmed and uploaded the video of me that day to YouTube with 2.2 million views. At the hospital, things got serious. I had to memorize 20-digit codes to notify the CDC that I needed to be locked up in their secret prison. I walked out of my room and over to a computer and did not manage to type in the code because a nurse stopped me. This failure did not sit well with Sarah. I was told that because she liked me, she would allow me to continue. I had the spirit to succeed and join DARPA. Next, I was given the task of running and punching this male nurse in the face, so I ran out of the room and punched this guy hard, only giving 70% of my strength instead of 100%. Again, I disappointed my handler. Then I was restrained with straps. The male nurse, the same one I knocked to the ground, was tying my ankles, and I had secret knowledge transmitted to me from government records that he rapes his 3 grandchildren. When I accused him in front of all the security and nurses tying me down, I looked him in the eyes. He looked shocked, but almost like he had been found out. He then forcefully gave me a shot of Geodon. The next task was to press the emergency button on one of the security officers' walkie-talkie to get the CDC's attention. After some time, the officers came in to unrestrain me. I was told by Sarah that I was going to break my nose to press the red button on the officer's walkie-talkie, but that I had to do it to continue. As soon as they took off the chest restraint, I smashed my face in the red button on the walkie-talkie strapped to the uniform of the officer next to my head. They immediately held me down again, but I overpowered them. I now had to strangle the same security officer with the draw cord of my pants. I put my hands down my pants, popped it, and pulled it out. It was already tied by chance from earlier. I managed to get the cord on the back of the guy's head while 4 dudes were holding me down. They put so much force on me I thought they were breaking bones in my ribs and legs. I stopped and complied. I looked at the reflection in the security camera's glass enclosure, and Sarah showed me how badly they had beaten me. I was covered in bruises and had black eyes. She edited reality, so I was okay. I had barely passed the tests, in spirit at least, but was still liked by my handler, Sarah. Hours went by. I was given an option: to bite the nurse coming in through her pants on her muff or kick her in the face repeatedly. Yes, you are going to have to kill people, go to the CDC prison. You will get raped, I heard in my head from Sarah. I was informed I would be going to the CDC secret prison to investigate Alpha PvP analogs and others to be used as military weapons. There was a third option now though, to see my mom one last time. If I did the other option, she would die before I ever saw her again. I was informed that events 20,000 years in the future depended on this decision. If I chose my mother, I would be allowing a space tyrant to claim victory over a region of space that included humanity. I was even beamed images of this being and his alien craft. The future of our world was in my hands, but I still chose to see my mom. I was ridiculed for hours about being a baby and a mama's boy by Sarah. The nurses allowed me to call my mother, and she showed up hours later. She did not show up alone though. 2 sheriffs took me handcuffed to the state insane asylum when the Geodon shot kicked in, or I started to come down, or both. I was fully calm after 2 hours at the asylum, 8 days awake at this point. I was at the asylum for 3 hours, then talked my way back home, telling the interviewing doctor I was sane and that it was just the drugs. I promised him I would go to drug treatment immediately. That took another 13 months of insanity of this kind and near intensity for that to happen. Once arriving home, I figured that since I had failed my DARPA application, I might as well search for some Alpha PvP on the floor of the bathroom, as I often did to much success. I would order 100 grams of it and carelessly use it, wiping several hundred milligrams off the counter to floor many times. I did search and I did find some. I had to rip up big ceramic tiles to complete my search and cut my hand in the process. That was irrelevant. I'd collected the crystals I needed. I vaporized them as quick as a highly addicted human physically could hope to. The voices came right back and told me to smash my favoriteest kitty cat's head on the hearthstone and kill your mom now. That was my only ticket back to join DARPA. I did not comply. I listened more to my handler's voice. She was a young, attractive female who during my hospital stay relayed that she actually was an AI from the future with a half-Asian, half-white avatar. But she pretty much only screamed and often said, "Oh my god, you are so fucking stupid. Why are you doing this to me? I thought you were special." And, "Application denied. I have started the 5-minute countdown to stop your heart." While I was at the hospital, she even edited my tongue tactile sense and let me lick her nipples virtually. One time, mid-lick, she edited into reality a fat buddy of mine's nipple in real time as a joke. There was much more Florida imagery and voices beamed into my head that I cannot get out into writing for some reason. I am still struggling from that experience. It seriously traumatized me, and I know I have some mental scars from it. It broke me. The voices in my head over the last months have changed into me from a different universe, and now I have accepted that it is my brain. Honestly, I feel better off from all of this. Stay safe. It had been shortly after a devastating breakup. In my previous teen years, I had dabbled with a range of prescription drugs, benzos, opiates, amphetamines, and even used bath salts for a short period of time, as well as a casual marijuana smoker. I had always told myself I would never try hard drugs, heroin and meth. Yes, even though I used bath salts. Anyways, so within about a week after my breakup, a relationship that lasted 13 months, I was in a pretty bad headspace. Knowing my weed dealer was also a major junkie, I asked him to hook me up with some glass. I just wanted a little taste of the drug. We met up shortly before I had to work. He gave me a pipe to use it with. I headed back home on foot. Keep in mind, I went into this decision with the absolute mindset of, don't get hooked, don't let it ruin you, it's a one and done thing. I was very set on that before even going in. I get home about maybe a little less than an hour and a half away from when I had to go to work, retail associate. I'm home debating if I really wanted to do this or not. It looked like nice clear quartz in small rocky formations with a few larger shards. I made up my mind, loaded a very tiny bit into the previously used dirty pipe. There had even been little bits of residue remaining. I disregarded that. I lit up the pipe just a little bit with my Bic lighter, and within a few seconds, it started to bubble, and then the thick white smoke emerged. I inhaled the hit and immediately tasted the disgusting chemical. It was a little harsh on the lungs and tasted like piss. Never tasted piss, but seems like what I'd imagine it to taste like. I exhaled the vapor and had instantly, I mean instantly, felt the effects. I was tweaking. My heart was racing. Could have been the nervousness, could have not, but it was racing. I felt this insane rush sweep through my brain. Instantly, I wanted more, but I held off on the pressure. It was a craving like I had never felt before. At this point, I had felt clammy and sweaty. I decided to load another hit, about the same size as the hit before, this time holding the lighter a little longer to get it really milky. I took the hit, tasted the same nasty taste. Oh, and I forgot to mention, the smoke smells horrible too. I'm pacing around my room and then remember I have to get ready for work. I gather my clothes and start getting dressed. I noticed I was extremely fidgety and could not keep any part of my body still. I try to stand up straight, but there is a very noticeable queasiness right in my stomach, making it impossible to stand straight without feeling like I had to throw up. All I could think about was more. I had to have more, so I would burn the remaining residue in the pipe about 2 times, and then loaded a clean third hit. I can't emphasize enough how strong the craving felt. It was exactly as the word craving means. There's no better explanation. Also by this time, I noticed I smelled terrible. It seems the sweat coming from me reeked the smell of cat piss. It was gross, but I still took the hits. I was tweaking hard. I decided to go out for a cigarette, ended up smoking 2, maybe 3 in just a few minutes. Sitting or standing still was not an option. 30 minutes later, it was just about time for me to leave for work. I took one more hit before leaving. I had arrived at work right as I was supposed to clock in. Parents had driven me and were not aware of what was going on. I punched my numbers in, and immediately after doing so, I turned to the sink next to me and threw up 3 times. I was pale, sweating, fidgety, and was in no condition to work. I told my manager I was sick and threw up as soon as I clocked in, so she sent me home. I had gotten home and jumped in the shower, immediately trying to get the nasty stench off of me. I sat in there for about 20 minutes maybe. I was really monitoring my heartbeat and mentally reviewing all that had happened in about the last hour-ish. I noticed my skin had looked very transparent, as in my veins were so easily visible, even ones I could not have seen before doing this drug. My veins were deep blue, very visible. My dick had also shrunk a lot. I tried to masturbate for a little while, but I was just too uncomfortable to finish. Eventually, I'd gotten out of the shower. I thought I smelled okay. The cat piss smell came back very quickly though. I had immediately stuffed the pipe and remaining meth in a bag behind one of my drawers that I could pull out, so it was somewhat a little harder to access. I'd still wanted more, but I forced myself not to. Fast forward through the night, everyone had gone to sleep, but me? No, I was far from that. I got into my bed and just laid there in the dark room. Moonlight was creeping very slightly through my blinds, so I could still see around my room just a little bit. As I laid there, I was sweating hard. My heartbeat did not feel consistent, my stomach was aching, and I could not lay still. I just sat and watched the fan above me do rotations for a very long time, a couple hours at least, honestly. The whole night I was in extreme discomfort and wide-eyed. I took another shower at some point too because the smell was just too much. Throughout the time I was in my bed, I was occasionally seeing black spots in my vision and could have sworn I heard someone's voice too. I was very paranoid. The sun finally comes up and I have not slept a wink. My body had felt exhausted, but my mind was still going a million miles an hour. I stayed home for the day, just laying down, fidgety, paranoid, uncomfortable, and sweating. I took quite a few showers throughout the day, and food was not in my agenda whatsoever. Luckily, I drink lots of Ensure protein shakes on the regular, so I had a huge stock of those in my fridge. I drank several throughout the day to at least force some kind of nutrition into my body, but anything other than liquids was too difficult to eat. Come nighttime again, everyone is asleep, but here I am, still buzzing in my mind. I tried closing my eyes, but they would not stay closed. Another night without a single minute of sleep. I was really afraid I had damaged my body. Finally, the third day, I called up a different guy of mine. At the time, he had grown magic mushrooms. I asked him if he wanted to trade some shrooms for the remaining meth I had left. He agreed. He picked me 8 grams of nice fresh wet shrooms right from the bucket he had grown them in, and I ate a good amount of those shrooms. It was evening time at the time of taking these. Thankfully, the shrooms allowed me to disregard some of the discomfort I was feeling. The trip ended later that night. I had no meth in the house. I was happy to get rid of it. I climbed into bed and had one of the strangest sleeping experiences. I slept for only about 5 or 6 hours. The thing is though, my eyes were open the whole time. I clearly remember watching the fan above me rotating, as well as the room getting lighter and lighter as the sun came up, over the hours, but my mind was shut off. I don't know how to explain it. All I can say was nothing was going on in my mind. I had zero thoughts as I just laid there still. I woke up mentally and realized I was still in the same position as I fell asleep in. Whether or not that was actually sleep, my body felt somewhat refreshed as if I had actually slept. Finally, it was all over. I never had any more cravings after that night, and to this day have never thought about doing it again. I could see how it can so easily take over one's life. The craving was real. Meth is no joke. Never again. If I could talk anybody into not partaking in this horrible, life-stealing, evil drug, then let it be known you have been warned. I know this doesn't happen to everybody, but I have noticed a theme in my research on the subject. Someone has great times at first, but after a while, their mind begins to become more and more susceptible to these extreme cases of delusions and psychosis. You will eventually run into police with the antics, and you will do extremely shameful and damaging things to your reputation, personal belongings, and freedom. And the more times you are putting giant shots of coke into your arms, the more likely you are to occasionally miss. If you are like me, it will be many times. It only seems feasible that out of thousands of shots with the drug that clogs your veins, it is literally impossible to not fuck it up. And even if you do get it right, the shit travels straight to your heart. There is literally no way to safely partake in intravenous cocaine. I have had deep vein thrombosis, blood clots, endocarditis, minor sepsis, you name it. They said if I would have waited a day or two more, they would have had to amputate my arm. If there was a way to safely enjoy it, I would have figured it out already. Please heed my message and just save yourself the heartbreak, literally your heart, not to mention your family. There are plenty of other enjoyable recreational drugs that won't steal everything from you in such a short period of time, and some that can even benefit your life in a positive way. I started off relatively benignly with drugs, choosing to only smoke weed for a long time, before graduating to psychedelics, then opiates, alcohol, benzos, and eventually ended up, as of about 2+ years ago, getting heavy into some intravenous cocaine. I had initially picked up the needle after a friend hit me with some Dilaudid, but they were expensive, and after trying cocaine, it was like, holy shit, this is taking me right to the edge, but not past it. I'd get the audio distortions, like hearing music become electrified coming through a tiny can. This was my favorite effect. The waves of orgasmic euphoria, the rushing of the train, tinnitus, etc. I quickly became pretty highly addicted to this feeling, and for a while, I could get off on like 100 to 120 milligrams, which eventually became 150. Then I started speedballing occasionally, with Dilaudid and heroin, and sometimes do goofball shots with methamphetamine, which at first was awesome, prolonging the bell ringer, but very quickly seemed to be doing damage to my brain. I was increasing the dosages of the coke up into the 200, then 250, then 300, then 350 range. I was spending so much on these massive coke shots that I couldn't afford to buy any opiates with it anymore. This was really badass fish scale cocaine that would dissolve instantly and turn totally to water. I'd wear out my veins as time went on and have fond memories associated with each vein that I used to hit. Oh, when I was able to hit that vein, it was good times, and I could jam Red Hot Chili Peppers and chill. I eventually started getting extreme paranoia that would start to come on with these repeated and increased dosages, thinking there were women outside my window or sneaking up on me, or hidden in my mattress, closet, or hallway. There were times I'd run outside in my boxers in freezing cold weather, climb the fence, and insist that this woman I had been with had jumped the fence and was hiding in the tree. I would call into my neighbors' backyards, "You can't get away with this forever," and shit like that. At first, I attributed this to my occasional meth usage, but it quickly also began occurring when I was only shooting coke. I went to rehab while coming down off of multiple stimulants and drugs and got clean. I came back a month or two later and decided that maybe I would try to take it easy this time. So I got some coke and loaded up a smallish shot, 200 milligrams. I quickly realized that my tolerance had not fallen at all in months of time off, 60-ish days. I still required 350 milligrams to get high, and inevitably it came with all sorts of health issues, so I took another long hiatus, only using occasionally and never really enjoying it again. When I started getting up into above 400 milligrams, the effects started to take a serious toll on my heart, but I wasn't getting the music effects as much anymore, so I kept trying for higher doses foolishly. I would often do a shot, then start to try to sit down or do something, even just grab a cotton to place on the site, and inevitably my legs would give out and I would crash into something. My heart rate would be above 180, and I would feel like perhaps this time would be the time I would die. I guess it would be similar to an awake seizure. I would try to stand up and the coke would continually sit my ass back down. This was not really fun anymore. My family would know that I'd shot up if they heard a crash in the other room and find me behind furniture or with shit sprawled all over the room, with me on the floor or kneeling. Somewhere along the line, the dosages were not doing it anymore, so I kept on increasing, chasing that bell ringer that never seemed to occur anymore. I would only have a massive rush for maybe a few seconds before it became a full-scale freak-out or health scare. I ended up spending 2 to 3 weeks in the hospital after they did a major surgery, 1 inch by 1 inch gaping holes in 4 different places on muscles in my arms in order to remove a blood clot and treat me for deep vein thrombosis. I had to take blood thinners for months after. You'd think I learned from this, but I started shooting again while I was still on blood thinners. When I did use, this extreme psychosis and paranoia returned in full force as well. This in turn also started happening with my family members instead of just a woman. I would do a shot and be certain that there were family members hiding behind the door and would feverishly open it, shine my flashlight into the hallway, look under the door, check the walls for cracks and secret cameras, do all sorts of sick crazy things that I normally wouldn't give a fuck about or even care what the hell they were doing. I'm usually not doing anything worth looking at, and if they want to waste their time, then that's just them being sick or having no life. I would stab into mattresses like a crazy person with all sorts of objects, syringes, screwdrivers, knives, kick the mattress and bed frame, thinking I would kick someone who was hiding there, tear apart my room, check the corners of the walls, because I was certain they had created tunnels or ways to observe or fire things at me from tiny pin-sized holes in the walls. I mostly have stayed off of it for a while, several months at least between uses, and noticed, for the most part, that my mental health had returned to normal. I still am just a little bit on edge sometimes, like a little bit too attentive to or aware to what's going on in the rooms around me, or wondering what noises were and stuff, but nothing seriously psychotic as far as behavior. I made the terrible mistake of using again very recently, went out and bought 2 grams of some Fire Blow. The first time I used it, I did a 0.25 gram shot, thinking I would take it light and that drinking would help, and immediately went into deep field psychosis when I was just trying to listen to some music. While I'm still holding the injection site, I spring into the psychotic combing of the room. I repeated this experiment and didn't get any sleep that night, extremely hellish. But this last usage was the absolute culmination of all the scary-ass psychotic shit that I have ever done. I took what was maybe 0.2 grams, then added a little more visually, and broke that all down with the 8 mg dilly, and did that all in one shot. Now mind you, when I first started, this would have been an incredible and enjoying rush, but the point is that my mind has somehow been ruined by all of this usage, and that I can no longer enjoy IV cocaine without extreme mental disturbances. Point being, I do the shot, and I'm immediately going into heavy dysphoria and paranoid freakout. It's not even fun, and I think I'm being watched by my family. I decide I'm gonna tone it down with some bourbon, so I reach to pour the glass, and I must have gotten hit with some kind of weird waking seizure. I spilled the glass all over the place and get stuck in some sort of paralyzed shape in midair, and my breathing is so heavy and I'm falling into the walls. Well, my brother lives in the other room and he is completely aware I'm crazy, so I imagine he gets the rest of my family. I have started going into some serious hallucinations. I suddenly realized that my brother's boyfriend is under my bed with a hidden camera and perhaps a knife or needle. I believe that they have another friend behind my dresser and that my brother himself is hiding out behind the door of my bathroom or my closet, or both by use of tunnel. I am seizing on the ground, but I am watching shapes of them peeking out from under the different places, shoving objects at me, wooden stakes, shooting liquids at me with needles, mini cameras with lights trained on me. I'm yelling at this point incoherently, and the seizure is stopping me from doing anything but grunts and growls and half sentences and words. My sister's boyfriend comes to the door, which further makes me think this is a giant conspiracy going on, and I'm fully ready to fight 4 people from 4 different directions, but I can't stand up. They tell me that the cops are coming, and I'm saying, go ahead, this isn't right to be in my room and under my bed. This standoff continues until the cops arrive, and I'm still stuck in a fit on the ground, and I'm hoping the cops will see these intruders with their lights, which I clearly see them pointing at the cops. I see their punches and hands grabbing and trying to hit me even around the legs of the cops, telling the cops, "How can you let them hit you like that? Can't you see this isn't right?" etc, etc. After a long period of struggling but not being combative, they let me onto a stretcher somehow, and it's taking a team of them to deal with me. I'm still convinced I saw my dad, even though he was apparently 100 miles away. Luckily, I knew one of the close responders as a cousin, only realized this later, and luckily they forced 2 shots of midazolam into my hand and arm because I finally calmed down. I still truly felt that this happened, and that the cops must have caught it on their cameras for a full 24 hours while I was drying out in the ER. The worst news is that after taking all my blood and shit, the doctor came up and told me before I left he thought I had contracted endocarditis based on some sort of levels of chemicals that they test for. This is basically an infection of the heart. I don't have a serious case of it yet, but it basically is this buildup of shit in your heart valves that stops your heart from working properly. I imagine this is from 2+ years of heavy IV cocaine usage, brief period of meth use, as well as occasional black tar, dilaudid, and China. I drink a lot and use tobacco/vapes, but I think that the cocaine is clearly the culprit here. The treatment is a 6-week stay in a hospital hooked up to a main line where they feed IV antibiotics into your system 24/7 in an attempt to reverse the deleterious effects. This would interfere with my schooling and my job, and the bills will assuredly follow me for years and years and years. I know that's a small price to pay for my life, but not only did this affect my health, but my relationship with my family, my pocketbook, spent well over $30,000 on coke in 2 years, and that's just what I have documented. Put my freedom at risk, and left my arms looking absolutely horrible. It happened a long time ago, but I can remember it like it was yesterday. A girlfriend gave me her little brother's unused supply of Ritalin tablets, 60 pills, 10 milligram, immediate release. That night we had chopped up and snorted 3 apiece, and I instantly loved the cocaine-type feeling. I went home later, around 10 p.m., and started to crash, so I called her to talk. Still possessing 54 tablets, I started to crush them up, one by one, snorting a tablet about every 5 minutes while talking on the phone. I am sure I was blabbering complete nonsense, and so she let me go at around midnight. I continued to snort 1 tablet at a time, and soon it was 3 in the morning. I was amazed that I didn't reach a plateau, but instead just got more and more geeked. I had cut back to 1 tablet/line every 15 minutes, and had finally stopped at around 1:30 a.m. I had school the next day, but knew by this point I would not be making it to class. Little did I know how that point would come painfully home to me in short order. Suddenly, around 3:30 a.m., I noticed that my heart was doing 200 beats per minute, right at maximal heart rate for one my age. Worse still, I realized I had gone through 20 tablets since arriving home. I had also smoked 2 packs of Marlboro Lights as they increased the buzz substantially. I tried to lay in bed and sit still, afraid that any exertion would cause my heart to explode. Unfortunately, the high just kept getting stronger. This was due to the fact that I probably had half a bottle of crushed Ritalin filling the tube running from my nostril into my lungs. Not all of the drug had even reached my bloodstream 2.5 hours after snorting the last line. I began to seriously freak out, knowing that my body was not designed for this type of stimulation. I mean, really, I was more pumped than if I had gone ashore naked, holding a butter knife with a bullseye painted across my chest on D-Day. I cautiously ambled into the bathroom, trying very hard to avoid a heart attack, and began pouring water up my nose, trying to wash out the remaining Ritalin powder. I ended up vomiting, and this caused frightening and sporadic arrhythmia, heart beating out of sync. I went back to bed and foolishly lit a cigarette. On the first draw, shit started to seriously go wrong. My heart continued skipping beats, and it became increasingly hard to breathe. I tried to yell for help, but couldn't even make a sound, save for a rapid gasp. All of my focus was on trying to breathe, as I had to force every breath. Remember folks, breathing is an involuntary response, and to have it become voluntary, painfully forced, is the scariest thing in the world. This went on for 15 minutes as I debated what to do. Then the shit really hit the fan. As more Ritalin flooded my brain, the left half of my body went completely numb, with sharp, prickling sensations similar to when my foot falls asleep. This quickly led to total paralysis of the left side, and I knew then that I was already too late. I was going to die. I mustered all my strength to go downstairs and awaken my mom. This resulted in a somewhat controlled fall, which did the trick of waking her. I stuttered uncontrollably, demanding that she call an ambulance, now. She had been deeply sleeping and muttered something about me having a nightmare and needing to go back to bed. Damn straight I was having a nightmare, while very wide awake. I had no strength to argue or even make it to the phone. Besides, a part of me knew that I would be in deep shit since the cops would inevitably arrive with the paramedics when I told them I was overdosing. I envisioned the neighbors gathering around to drool and gawk, and the shame that my mom would face losing her son to a drug overdose. So I lay in the foyer, convulsing and praying for a quick death. I thanked God for letting me live my life happily up to that point, and apologized for taking my life for granted just to get a buzz. I just wanted to go to heaven because I was definitely in hell. She went back to bed, having never really fully awakened, and my convulsions and pleading prayers continued for another hour or so. Finally, and oh so thank Godfully, the Ritalin loosened its hold on my wrecked body and mind. I was able to stumble upstairs and continued praying well past daybreak, asking the Lord to spare my life, swearing to never touch another drug again. I awoke around noon that day, still feeling wired, but fairly confident that I was going to live. I didn't remember falling asleep. It must have happened in seconds, as my used up body just gave out. I went to see the doctor later that week, having already rescinded on my promise to not get high. I was there trying to swindle some painkillers for my bad back. I was seriously depressed and in the throes of poly-drug addiction. He saw me for what I was, a drug-seeking patient, and asked me to be honest about my drug use. So, having nothing to lose, I told him about my near-death experience while snorting Ritalin. He explained that I probably had a minor stroke. Fuck, what does a major stroke feel like? And referred me for further testing. A while later, I had an ECG where they looked at my heart. Thank God it was normal. That still left the status of my brain on question, as a stroke could have left me at a higher risk for a sudden death due to an aneurysm, a blood vessel in the brain bursts, but I could not afford the tests, PET scan. So I never conclusively found out if I had a stroke, but it still worries me to this day. Thus, I largely avoid stimulants. I have only had a few lines of cocaine years after the event and some caffeine now and again. I hope the telling of this tale will prevent someone from experiencing what I can definitively say was the most horrifying experience of my life. I literally looked death in the face, and I know what it feels like right before you die, especially by your own hand. Horrible. I will never again question that the strongest basic instinct among humans is to live. I think part of the reason that it was so scary is that I put myself in that situation. I have never, and would never, think of suicide, yet I almost caused my own death. That said, I guess the positive spin is that I have much less fear of dying. Any death must be better than at one's own hand, and I now truly appreciate every day as the gift that it is. At any age or at any time, I could be having the time of my life, and then it all just ends. There's no arguing to save my own ass. That's it. The sentence has been handed down, and it's off to the death chamber. No second chance, no time for goodbyes. Holy fucking shit. Do not snort that many Ritalin pills, or any pills for that matter. That is a fucking crazy amount, and I'm surprised that guy did not die. This is a harm reduction channel for a reason, because there are people out there that are like this for real. Let's get to the next story. This report is written for the reason that there are so many research chemicals out there, and that so many people, myself included, who are willing to do them and have no idea what is in them. This is a cautionary tale, one that I hope will make people think twice before snorting, shooting, smoking, plugging, or ingesting a chemical they know nothing about. I have tried just about every type of drug I could get my hands on since the age of 13. The list goes on, but my preferred drug of choice has always been stimulants. Cocaine and methamphetamine were two of my all-time favorites. In 2011, I had lost my last connection to illicit drugs, and an NBC Dateline special alerted me to drugs that were being sold in head shops and online: bath salts. Ignoring all of the bad things they had to say, I concentrated on the good: euphoric, cheap, and legal. I immediately got online and found a site where I purchased $40 worth of bath salts, which turned out to be 500 milligram packages of White Rush. After it arrived in the mail, I researched it for months before I ever tried the stuff. If what I found was true, I had MDPV. Eventually, I worked up the courage to try it, but to my credit, it actually took 8 months. All the things I had read about it made me very leery, and I valued my brain too much to be so reckless. Well, the time and the place finally arrived, and it got me very high, but it was somewhat scary. After using one full package over the course of several months, I threw it away, deciding that it was too dangerous. Trip reports I'd read told of people binging on it for days and succumbing to psychosis. I did not want this to happen to me. About a month after tossing it, I was jonesing again, so I returned to the internet to see what I could find. My research turned up VIP champagne shoe deodorizer. After much debate, I bought a gram, and when it arrived, I waited about 2 months before I tried this one. I couldn't find, in all my investigations, what the active chemical in it was, so I decided at one point it was probably MDPV. Sounded right. I wound up doing the gram in 4 separate occasions, finding that snorting this stuff did nothing, but smoking and IV usage were very pleasant. It was like cocaine and similar to the White Rush, but I could use it over the course of 8 hours or so and not worry about any heart-related issues, as had been the problem with MDPV. When the package was gone and I wanted to order another, the manufacturer had stopped making it. Several months went by and I ordered and tried many different things, none of them with any good results. Arctic Rush was one, did nothing. Lifted was another, less than nothing. And then I branched out into Kratom and Salvia. In January of 2013, I saw that VIP champagne was going to be available again, in a new formula. 2 actually. One was in a gold package, the other in a red package. I ordered one of each to the tune of about $40 per. Once again, the same thing. It arrived and I left it alone for a while until I finally had the proper amount of time and courage to try it. As with the other version, I couldn't find what was in it, but the biggest difference was that this one came with a warning. Do not use this product with alcohol or any other substance. I think that was a big reason I didn't touch it for so long. I like drinking beer with everything I do. One Saturday after work, and only a couple of small things to do the next day, I was drinking beer and smoking weed, and after consuming a pizza and passing out in front of the TV, I awoke and suddenly decided I was going to try the VIP champagne in the gold package. It was a powder with little chunks, so I eyeballed and laid out what I thought was about 20 milligrams and snorted it. 30 minutes later, I felt my heartbeat rev up, coupled with a slight sense of euphoria, but not enough to make it worthwhile. Mostly I just felt jacked up. Fearing for my safety, I popped 2 milligrams of Xanax I had on hand just in case. About 30 minutes after that, I felt my heart rate slowing, and now that I felt like I was safe, I decided to try smoking some. Here's where the trip report truly begins, but where my clarity of what was going on ends. I placed a small pile in tinfoil, the same amount I snorted, and found it burned right up. The buzz was intense, highly euphoric. Awesome. It lasted maybe a half an hour or so before I felt like I needed more, but that is approximate. I totally lost control with this stuff, much like I always did with cocaine and meth. I soon lost focus on how much and when I was doing it, although I shifted from smoking to shooting. Shooting this stuff was really good, the buzz was very powerful, and I was having a blast. I actually have no idea what I was doing while doing this drug. I honestly can't remember. I blasted away for about 8 hours before deciding to pop another 2 mg Xanax and stop for the night. I slept for 3 hours and woke up knowing where I was, what I was doing, etc. And after completing the 2 tasks I had to do, in an alprazolam haze, I drove and I barely remembered doing it. I returned to my place and decided to start shooting and smoking the VIP champagne again. I used it all day for probably 12 hours, and all I can say is that I spent that time attempting to write emails and texts and doing stuff on my computer, but all of my physical abilities were wiped out. Seriously, I couldn't even write a 2-word sentence without it taking an hour, but that was okay with me. I felt so good. I remember making phone calls to anyone in my Rolodex, anyone who would pick up their phone. I sounded fine and clear, but my memory of all this is vague and my motor skills were shot. By 11 that night, I decided to stop because I had to work the next day, and using only Benadryl, I got about 6 hours of sleep. My personal hell started after that. Because of a crazy erratic heartbeat, I wound up ducking out of work and went to an urgent care by about 10:30 that morning. I told them the truth, showed them the IV marks, begged for something that would make me feel better. The doctor gave me 20 milligrams of propranolol, a drug used for high blood pressure. This brought my heart rate down, but it also made me dizzy. I made it through the day, but my problems were far from over. When I tried to sleep that night, I found that every time I was right on the cusp, just about to fall asleep, one of my limbs jerked, instantly awaking me. It went on like that all night. Any stimulant abuser has probably been through this before. I had experienced this once or twice before from a combination of cocaine and heroin. It generally lasted one night and then went away. Not this time. It went on for 5 days before I was finally back at the urgent care, begging the doctor for a sleep aid. She prescribed 50 milligrams trazodone first, and when that didn't work and I went back to her, she prescribed 2 milligrams lorazepam. That did work, but the efficacy was diminished by the 3rd night, and this sleep twitch was far from gone. Here's where the story can get long and drawn out, but I'll boil it all down into its major components. I went to see my doctor, and he misdiagnosed me, telling me the drug had opened up within me, latent bipolar disorder. He wanted to put me on Seroquel. I went and got a second opinion, and that douchebag was worse than the first. He told me to seek psychiatric care. I went to a psychiatrist and she listened, deemed me to be a drug addict, and gave me a limited prescription for Ambien under the condition that I see her again for reassessment. I then told my doctor this, and he prescribed 30 milligrams mirtazapine, then medical marijuana, then 5 milligrams ropinirole. This drug is for Parkinson's and on low doses restless leg syndrome. None of them worked, and some, the ropinirole, had very nasty side effects. Finally, at my rope's end and ready to commit suicide, I confessed all this to my parents and they flew me home to see a doctor of theirs who then referred me to a neurologist. The neurologist set me up to do a sleep study, at which time I was diagnosed with exaggerated hypnic twitches and prescribed 0.5 milligrams of clonazepam. He had heard of this disorder. It is mostly seen in meth and cocaine addicts. That drug finally worked. To this day, 14 months later, I still suffer about once a week from these sleep twitches. The neurologist hypothesized that they would go away eventually, and he was right, but they never are completely gone, and as of yet, I haven't done any stimulants. I am able to drink alcohol and smoke weed occasionally, but sometimes I get the twitches from that. Other times stress causes them, or going to bed too late and being very tired. This is very lengthy and without dosage and or an actual trip report, but what I can say is that the high was like cocaine and heroin combined, stimulated and alert but with no motor skills. It was a good buzz, but it certainly wasn't worth the $10,000 it cost me in doctors, treatments, loss of work, embarrassment at being such a druggie, etc., etc., etc. Before trying some drug you buy off the internet, I urge you to do some research first. If you cannot find what is in it, don't do it. And if it says not to combine it with alcohol or other drugs, don't. As bad as I felt throughout the sleep problem, at least I didn't overdose. At least I didn't die. I walked away, albeit much poorer. Be smart, be safe, always know what you are putting into your body. You never know where it may take you. I want to start out by saying that this trip report is a combined experience through my eyes of me, P, and my friend, C. I wanted to share this trip because it may help someone out there who sees the same symptoms in another person who has a bad reaction to MDA. As a side note, I'm fairly experienced with most psychedelics and had taken MDA 3 times previously. My friend C hadn't ever done a psychedelic before this night. It was my birthday, and C and I were at some bars at around 8 p.m. We had a few drinks, and one of my other friends that were there with us told me he had some MDA powder. I decided to buy a gram as I hadn't seen much MDA around my area for a while. C and I decided we didn't want to trip at the bars, so we headed back to my house, cleaned my room, and made it comfortable to flail around in and weighed out the powder. I used a scale to measure around 100 milligrams of the white powder for C and 200 milligrams for me since I was twice her weight and I had taken MDA of higher dosages before. We decided to parachute the dosages since I had snorted it and found it to be extremely harsh, so we tied them up in paper towels and swallowed them with a beer. I would say it was about 9 p.m. at first ingestion. 10 minutes in. Take a few shots of vodka and absinthe with some friends that wandered in the house. C kept her stomach empty. I would say I took in total around 2 shots of 40% vodka and 2 shots of 55% absinthe in a 20-minute period. 30 minutes in. Started to feel something very mild, like the nervousness that I get on any come up of a drug. C doesn't feel anything. An hour in. C is sitting in a chair and I'm laying on the bed, bummed out that nothing was really happening, other than being slightly buzzed from the alcohol, so I thought we had been ripped off. C exclaims that she is completely sober. An hour and 10 minutes in. Something very intense washes over C suddenly. She looks at me as I'm talking to her about going back to the bars, and I can immediately tell she just came up extremely hard. Her eyes are extremely dilated from just 10 minutes ago, and she gets up and starts moving around, dancing a little bit and telling me to get up and dance with her. I'm laughing a bit because I don't think she realized she was really tripping at this point, but I can tell just from the way she's acting that she is coming up, and coming up strong. So we dance for a bit, and I notice I'm feeling slightly off base, nothing too strong, and wondering if the alcohol diluted or somehow lessened the potency of the MDA I parachuted. An hour and a half in, still dancing, C realizes she is tripping and freaks out a little bit because it came on so quickly. I tell her not to worry and that it's normal to feel a confusing rush at the beginning, that it will taper off in a bit and give off into a more relaxed state. This is how my MDA experiences have been, at least. I get antsy since I'm not anywhere close to this level and decide to snort 100 milligrams more of the MDA powder. Looking back on it, I probably railed more like 180 as I eyed it out. An hour and 50 minutes in. I feel like I'm coming up a bit more. I feel a slight giggly feeling and feel very loose, like all my limbs are like jello. C, on the other hand, reports that she's feeling very odd and that her stomach hurts. I asked her what her vision looks like, and she says everything looks like it's shaking uncontrollably and that her stomach hurts, so she lies down and I decide to lay down with her for a bit and try to calm her down. 2.5 hours in. I feel like I have reached whatever low peak I'm going to reach and feel only a slight euphoria and relaxation in my body. Jaw definitely clenched a little bit, lights are brighter, and I feel generally good, even though I'm not tripping that hard. I decide against snorting any more as C is really freaking out now and scaring me because I haven't seen someone trip this hard ever. She now has dropped off from the extreme hyper come up that is natural with MDA in my experience. I could tell she is having a hard time by just the look in her eyes. Extremely confused, eye twitches, and more or less unresponsive, no emotion whatsoever, and how she's moving around. It's like her brain was seeing and processing everything so quickly that it produced that outwardly opposite effect. She couldn't stand upright very well without my help, and when she moved, it was extremely slow. She reports that she can't feel anything anymore. I'm freaking out a bit because she's starting to nod off. I immediately decide that I need to keep her awake and sentient, get her water, and take her to the bathroom. She's obviously not in a good state. 3 hours in. After 30 minutes of going through the motions of making sure she knows where she is, who she is, etc., making sure she's breathing, and making sure she stays awake, she suddenly snaps out of it for about 5 minutes, telling me that she can't think and that she thinks she's dying. I try to reassure her that everything will be fine and that she's just having a bad reaction. I tell her that she might go back to feeling that intense and try to console her that I'll be there to take care of her. 4 hours in. Same as before, she snaps out of it very briefly a few more times, but the rest of the time she is in the same state of delirium. I feel completely sober. 5 hours in. C finally starts coming down and rarely goes back to feeling delirious. I'm glad that she is finally coming out of it, as I said she would, and try to talk her through what she just experienced. She said the whole time she just felt like she was dying, as if there was no point to staying alive anymore, which is why she was trying to nod off. 5.5 hours in. We are watching a film to come down to, and we start both having some muscle spasms. Mine aren't bad and located only in my leg. C's, on the other hand, are actually frightening to watch. She will be laying down completely still, and all of a sudden her entire body will spasm, legs and arms flailing, head turning erratically from side to side for no more than 2 seconds at a time. This happens every 20 seconds to 1 minute. I have to literally hold her so she doesn't hurt herself in between. When she stands up to go somewhere, I have to hold on to her so that she doesn't spasm and fall over mid-walk. 7.5 hours in. Her spasms are finally dying down, but they still happen every so often. I'm extremely tired at this point and have to work in 4 hours, so I decide it's okay for me to go to sleep and that C will be fine. She's told me repeatedly to not worry about her and to go to sleep, but the muscle spasms are so spooky I stayed awake with her until she could. 9 hours in. I fell asleep somewhere along the line and slept restlessly. C reported that she couldn't sleep because she still got an occasional spasm. She reports that she's completely at base level now, but the muscle spasms continue to a lesser extent until I leave for work a couple hours later. I would have really enjoyed this experience if it weren't for the fact that I was scared so much for C. I've never seen someone react like that to what I consider a smaller dose, and it didn't help that I was high. I'm glad I wasn't on her level after all, and I'm surprised I wasn't after around 400 milligrams. Watching her start to doze off and tell me that she would be okay dying right now. Even when she came down, she had ghastly muscle spasms. I think the ultimate lesson I learned from this trip is that A, no matter how much I consider a common dose, some people are extremely sensitive to specific drugs, and B, even though it was frightening for me to watch, I knew in the back of my mind that everything was going to settle down for her, and nothing was going to be permanent like it is so easy to think when you are on harder drugs. It was a level head and that mindset that kept me from freaking out too much, and kept the situation under control. This is what I've been trying to preach to people for all this time. Everyone is different. Not every person can do the same dose and be fine, just like this person was. Hey, you could take a lower dose and still be out of control, you never know. For me personally, with weed, with one hit of weed, I feel like I'm gonna die because it's just instant panic, instant paranoia. But other people, one hit of weed will do nothing at all. So it just depends on each person and how you are. You can never underestimate what a drug can do to you, because they are very serious mind-altering substances, especially harder ones like this one. So just stay safe out there, guys. I just want to preach harm reduction here. You never know what can happen. You really never know. Muscle spasms and shit like that, that's scary to think about, especially if you were high as well, because that'll affect your trip too. So just want to get that point across here, guys. All right, have a safe one, and touch grass.